Good evening, my dear warrior of light. You found the Cosy Chocobo, my little corner of quiet tales, gentle dreams, and a little escape from the waking world. It's Yisselda, your guide to tonight's tale of fantasy, woven from the history books of Eorzea. So settle in, get comfortable, and let the journey begin. Tonight we will touch on the history of the world of Final Fantasy XIV and its land Eorzea. From the myth of creation to the forgotten ruins and sunken cities left by calamities that rose from wind and lightning and flame, to the defiant spirits of those who dared to build a future from the ashes of the past in the eras that followed each calamity, up to the rise and fall of the Allagan Empire. This is a deep dive into the lore and history of Eorzea as we know it across the first 4 expansions of the game prior to Endwalker, adapted from Encyclopedia Eorzea, Book 1. And if you enjoy this video, I invite you to like and subscribe for more relaxing sleep stories and lore inspired by some of my favourite video game franchises and books. Your wonderful support will help my new channel immensely. Now find a cozy and comfortable spot and relax your body. Let your thoughts slow like the ripples on Silvertear Lake. Let your breath soften like snow falling gently on the peaks of Kurthus. Feel a wave of warmth wash over you and picture yourself sitting next to a cozy hearth lit with a warming fire as an icy storm rains and thunders over the holy sea of Ishgard. A hot mug of chamomile tea in your hands. And as the moon climbs higher over the realm of Eorzea and the stars wheel quietly above, close your eyes. Let your breath deepen and allow the weight of the waking world to slip away as we begin. Before the world of Eorzea came into being, before time itself, there existed only Aether. It was endless and unshaped, a sea of potential that pulsed with possibility, the possibility of life in its corporeal form. Thus did 2 planes of existence come into being. One, the corporeal realm, was familiar, tangible. It held the weight of mountains and the warmth of firelight. It was the place of footsteps and falling leaves, of stone that could be held and blood that could be spilled. You and I dwell here, as do all life forms that exist beneath the sky. But alongside it stirred another, quieter, unseen. The ethereal realm, a place without shape, without form. It does not yield to touch or sight. It moves beneath the skin of the world, filled with the essence of all beings. It is also called the life stream, an endless sea of ether, where memory and all life that has been and is yet to be coalesce in silence. From the depths of the ethereal realm, as the life stream flowed with ether in its sea of life-giving potential, did a presence arise. It was not born, not made, but was willed into being by Hydaelyn herself. She and the world were one and the same, for it was she who created this world, for her love of the goodness of mankind was stubborn and strong. It is thus that within all beings, whether it be man, animal, or even plant, does ether flow. It is the spark which grants life to the lifeless. It constantly flows through creation, forming currents through earth, water, and air, ensuring that life is sustained throughout the world. Ether is the lifeblood of Hydaelyn, and without it, she and her children would perish. Some scholars, etherologists mostly, have long suspected that deep beneath the land slumbers a concentration of ether so vast it sings in silence. They call it the mother crystal. To them, it is more than proof of the star's lifeblood. It is evidence that the world itself is alive. Not just alive, but aware. They speak too of visions, of warriors and seers across history, those who rose when no others could, who stood against darkness and saw through time, who felt the stir of something vast just beyond comprehension. It is believed that these visions are not madness, but messages, quiet pleas whispered from the star to its chosen. A single theme recurs across myths, across cultures long lost and cities buried in dust. Hydaelyn's will, or the will of light. And in this age we have given it a name, the echo. It is through the echo that she reaches out still. It is her call that you have heard, you who have stood where others have fallen, you who are named warrior of light. Her will threads through your soul like dawnlight through mist. But still the question lingers, how did this all begin? How did this realm, this Eorzea, a land loved by gods and forged by heroes, come to be? To find the answer, we must look backward, beyond the bells of Gridania, past the gates of Sharlayan. We turn to Lufon, astrologian and theologian of great renown, who devoted his life to piecing together the fragments. His was not a single truth, but a tapestry of many. Legends from across the world, bound together in quiet harmony. So let us listen to the tale he gathered, the tale of creation. In the beginning, there was neither light nor darkness, only the whirl. And it was not until Althik emerged, thence in his nakedness, did time take its first step forward. With him the keeper also carried weight, and with weight were the realms of land and firmament defined. Yet Althik would not be alone for long, for soon from the whirl did another step forth. Her name was Nymea, whose tears created a vast lake, and Althik, seeking companionship in the empty realm of his creation, took the goddess under his wing. Their love for one another soon grew until it could no longer be contained, culminating in a divine coupling which resulted in the birth of two holy daughters, Azima, the sun, and Menfina, the moon, and with their advent was day and night conceived. So did countless cycles of night and darkness pass before once again did another step forth from the whirl. Thaliak, bearer of wisdom and knowledge, looked upon the silent and unchanging lake left by Nymea's tears and coaxed from it a river to carry that water to the far corners of the realm. Azima, drawn to Thaliak's sagacity, professed her love to the new deity and begot him 2 daughters, the first being Lindgren, who took the water created by her grandmother and expanded it into the world's seas. The second daughter was lonely Nofika, who, wanting for companionship, created her own playmates and thus brought life into the world. It was not until life had spread throughout the land and newly created seas that a new god appeared, though from whence the others did not know, for the world lay dormant. His name was Ocean, and where he wandered did towering mountains rise from level plains. With the formation of these spires did cold wind flow from on high, down to the warm seas and back up again, carrying life that was once reserved for land and water into the skies. Those winds did bring love into the heart of Lindgren, yet though she longed to be with Ocean, his wanderlust prevented the 2 from ever being joined over long, and lo, did they never beget children of their own. This was a time of great creation, but also of great chaos. Ocean's mountains rose and fell at his whims. Thaliak's rivers flowed higher and higher, and Lindgren's seas ever expanded, swallowing entire swathes of land before the gods even knew they were gone. To bring order to this chaos, Nymea pried forth a mighty comet from the heavens and gave it life, directing it down to the world that it may destroy the excess her sons and daughters had wrought, while bringing harmony once again to the realm. And for many days and many nights was the world calm, the gods content in the order which now reigned supreme. That is, until the world woke from its slumber and beckoned forth 2 final deities, Birago and his younger sister, Hydaelyn. It was feared that the untamed and ambitious siblings might once again usher chaos unto the world. So to see that they were properly disciplined, Nymea quickly made them wards of Ralga, the destroyer. A builder by nature, Birago resented his new stepfather, who could teach him only of destruction, and chose instead to spend most of his time in the tutelage of Thaliak. The scholar bestowed upon his eager student the knowledge he would use to forge the tools and techniques of creation. Though more open to her new father's teachings, Hydaelyn too grew restless. Longing to test her strength, an opportunity arose when Ocean invited the young goddess on one of his journeys. It was during these travels that Hydaelyn's ambition slowly transformed into a lust for battle. While on the road, she would challenge every creature she met, honing her skills and methodically devising new techniques for killing. When Nofika, mother of life, learned of Hydaelyn's wanton destruction of her creations, she was angered beyond words and swore revenge. But the fury ignored the matron's challenges, widening the rift between the 2. Ocean, feeling responsible for this rift, devised a plan to calm Nofika. From within the mountain of his creation, Ocean summoned a font of magma which spewed forth unto the land. Upon cooling, the magma took the form of the 12th and final god, the dual-aspected Nulthal. With Nulthal, Ocean had provided a god to oversee the souls of those who met their deaths and provide them with peace in the afterlife. Satisfied that her creations would no longer wander the void aimlessly, Nofika agreed to a truce with Hydaelyn. And with the 12th and final god was the pantheon complete. But before they could call an end to their toil, they first required a realm in which they could reside and watch over their myriad creation. To this end, they created the 7 heavens, and to there they finally did retreat, bequeathing rule of Eorzea to mankind. It is clear from Lufon's research that the 12 may ultimately be the creations of Hydaelyn herself. Together, they shaped and sanctified the realm of Eorzea and its lands, not as rulers above, but as stewards beside. They taught the elements how to dance. They walked amongst the first peoples, whispering the arts of fire and harvest, of stars and story. But gods are not meant to linger. Their gift was not command, it was choice. And so, as the first leaves turned and the winds began to change, the 12 withdrew beyond sight, not gone but watching. And as the star turned, so too did history. It is said that with this turning, the modern age of the source began. For the first umbral era was coming, and with it the first great calamity, the calamity of wind. Remembered more in story than in stone or script, scholars have long debated what force unbalanced the world in that forgotten age. But in the wake of the 6th calamity, when storm and flame returned anew, a clearer understanding emerged. And it was wind that tore through stillness, unseen but unrelenting, as if the very skies had turned against the star. Some speak of tempests unending, of a world whipped raw by gales that screamed across the mountains, lifting homes, forests, and dreams alike into the air. Others wonder if it was something deeper, a cataclysm not just of weather, but of elemental memory itself. The tale of Good King Mogulmog 12 also alludes to the events of the calamity. Long ago, the Mughals lived in the skies, in great drifting realms above the clouds. But then a great quarrel among the gods broke the peace of heaven, and the skies grew wild and dangerous. The winds, once their home, turned treacherous. Good King Mogul led his people downward to the world below, to the lands where the trees were kind and the wind did not bite. But he was forced to remain behind, holding back the storm so that others may live. Even now, in the high cliffs of Mogholm, the Mughals remember. They whisper of the wind that once howled above the clouds, of the great king who stayed behind, and of a disaster that came long before any written calamity, corroborating the events of the legend. As a consequence of the calamity, the gods withdrew from Eorzea, ending their direct involvement with the world's affairs, and thus the Age of the 12 came to a close. In its place began a new cycle, one not shaped by the divine hands of the gods, but by mortal hearts. So began the first astral era, a time of stone and fire. It was an age of emergence, of rebuilding, and of first steps into a world now truly entrusted to its people. When the bitter winds of the first calamity had passed into silence, the race of men came into their own. No longer did they wander aimlessly, feeding upon the gifts of the land and giving little in return. For in that age they came to master the arts of survival, the carving of stone, the kindling of fire, and the crafting of tools by which the world might be shaped to their will. With blade and hand they turned the soil and sowed the first seed. Hunting gave way to harvest, and the nomad's path was abandoned. Men built homes by river and beneath sheltering trees, and in time villages were raised in the hollows of valleys and on the slopes of hills. Within these simple settlements, the first sparks of civilization flickered into being. They tamed beasts and learned to draw metals from the bones of the mountains, and to shape them beneath the hammer's song and the fire's glow. And so it came to pass that villages grew into towns, and towns into realms. But kings are seldom content with walls that end where their vision does not. With the rise of power came the turning of the forge, no longer to tools for cultivation, but to weapons of war. Where once the hands of men built, now they destroyed. The forge no longer sang, it roared with iron and ambition. Thus did wisdom wane, and the realm descend into strife. War consumed the land. Fields, once golden with grain, ran red. The earth groaned beneath marching hosts and the clash of arms. Yet even amid their folly, the children of the star multiplied. More mouths, more homes, more hunger. To feed their swelling numbers, men felled the ancient woods, ploughed wild fields, drained marsh and glade. To arm their soldiers and build their thrones, they tore into the mountains and darkened the skies with smoke. Long did the world endure their burden. Long did the land yield to their want. But all things bear a breaking point, and when at last the scales were tipped by greed and unheeding ambition, the second calamity came. In the days that followed the downfall of the first astral era, when the pride of men had sundered the balance and the world stood once more upon the edge of ruin, there came upon the land a great burning of skies and a shaking of the bones of the earth. This was the second umbral calamity, and the wise name it the calamity of lightning. The mountains, long silent, belched forth fire and smoke, and from their fiery wounds rose clouds black as night. The sun was veiled, and the realm was cast into a twilight without end. From the heavens came the fury of the storm, a rain not of water, but of levin bolts white and cruel that sundered stone and steel alike. Fields were set aflame, lakes boiled to mist, and the walls of even the mightiest fortresses were split like clay. For a full year and a day the tempest raged. Men, in their terror, believed the gods had turned against them once more, that the 12, long silent, had grown wrathful beyond pardon. They fled their cities and temples, abandoning what little light remained, and took to the depths of the earth. There, in shadowed caverns and forgotten places, they sought shelter. But no refuge was to be found. Pestilence crept into the hollows, and plague walked unchallenged in the dark. One by one, children and elders alike were taken, and despair settled over the hearts of men like a shroud. It was in this hour of silence, when all hope seemed lost and no sword could ward off death, that the people turned to the only path yet open to them: prayer. They called out, not to kings nor heroes, but to the heavens themselves. With voices trembling and hands uplifted, they poured their fear and longing into words, and the words, carried upon breath and will, took shape. The scholars and theologians of later days speak of this time as the first awakening of magic. That in those deep places born of sorrow and faith, the spoken word took on power. That where the blade had failed, the soul had found new strength. From that moment forward, the people of Eorzea began to understand that hidden within sound, within chant and verse and sacred tongue, lay the threads of the Aether. And when woven with belief, they became something more, a spell. And so, by magic born of prayer, mankind endured. When at last the sky was parted and the thunder passed, the people emerged from the dark, changed and chastened. Those among them who had mastered this newfound gift, these sorcerers, priests, and enchanters, were given place and honor. They became the new stewards of hope. Thus the second astral era dawned upon the land, an age of faith. The people, newly emerged from shadow, turned their hearts skyward. They remembered the wrath of the storm and saw in it the judgment of the gods. The kings of old, they whispered, had fallen for their greed and faithlessness, and only through devotion might the world be spared a second ruin. In that age, charismatic leaders arose, not with swords in hand, but with scripture and song upon their lips. The people gathered around them, and so were the first great churches born. The old kingdoms crumbled like dust, and in their place rose theocracies, shaped not by bloodlines but by belief. Temples rose like mountains, high and glittering, carved from white stone and crowned with gold, each a stair to heaven in the eyes of those who laboured upon them. Stonemasons worked by torchlight, with hands guided by reverence. The mantra was always the same: to the heavens. In the shadow of these sanctuaries the arts flourished. Painters adorned walls with divine light. Goldsmiths fashioned relics to gladden the gods, and blacksmiths turned their skills from plough to blade, for the faithful must also be defended. But where faith takes root, pride often follows, and pride among mortals is never without consequence. The high priests, their power unchecked, grew bold and cruel. Each temple claimed to be the one true path. The light that had united now divided. Petty rivalries ignited great wars. Holy wars, they were called, though no god had ever asked for them. Fire consumed village and city alike. The sky, once filled with prayer, echoed only with the cries of the dying. Thus did the third umbral era come upon the world. Towns were razed, children sold, and fields left untended. Hunger followed behind the sword. The victors hoarded wealth with no use, for there were none left to buy or build. The realm, once raised high in piety, had sunken again into darkness. Not the darkness of night, but that which dwells in the heart of men. And the gods, if they watched at all, turned away. From the blackened land rose flame once more. The sun grew large and cruel, sapping the world of its breath. Rivers withered, forests turned to dust, and the grain of the fields crumbled in the hand. Thus dawned the calamity of fire, and the end of the era of belief was turned to ash. When at last the flames died, the people crawled from the wreckage not in worship, but in wary silence. They no longer built shrines or raised their voices in hymns. For the first time, they looked not to the heavens, but to themselves. Thus began the third astral era, and with it a new fire, not of gods, but of ambition. In this age of reason rose a people unmatched, the Allagans. They placed their faith not in divinity, but in the works of their own hands. They honoured no temples, save those of knowledge and craft. The stars were theirs to study, the elements theirs to command. In the forges of Allag, alchemists, artificers, and engineers built wonders undreamt of in any previous age. At the heart of this awakening stood a man whose name would outlive the sun itself. Zand, the first of emperors. Wise beyond reckoning and bold beyond measure, he gathered to himself the brightest minds of the realm. And though he was a man of science, he did not shun the gifts of the past. The last descendants of the priests and witches were welcomed among the Allagans, not as outcasts but as mages, and so magic and science walked hand in hand. Zand forged a nation from the soil of the three continents of Uldanard, Ilzabard, and Othard, and the standard of Allag was hung in every city beneath the sky. His armies, strengthened by mages of great power, swept across the realm with scarcely a wound. In less than a year, the world was his. But Zand, wise as he was not blind to the passage of time. He knew that even an empire forged in brilliance may fade, and that kings, though mighty, are mortal. And so he prepared his heirs with care, trained them, moulded them, set their feet on the path to permanence. And for a time, peace prevailed. At Silvertear Falls, the Allagans raised spires that reached to the heavens, not temples but engines of light. From them the sun's power was gathered, and the world below was warmed and brightened by artifice alone. At the centre of it all rose Circus Tower, later to be called the Crystal Tower, a monument to their greatness and the seat of the Empire's strength. For 3 centuries, no war marred the land. The people flourished. The miracle of aetherochemistry, the marriage of spell and science, gave them all they could dream of, and more. But in time, as ever, ease gave way to indolence. The people grew soft. Minds, once sharp with invention, turned toward leisure. The burden of work was laid upon machina, and with every passing year, fewer remembered how to learn, how to lead, or how to build. The flame that had once blazed in the heart of Allag dimmed to embers. One man, however, saw what others would not. His name was Amon, a technologist of rare genius and graver ambition. He believed that only a sovereign of unmatched vision could restore the empire. A leader like Zand, who had carved greatness from dust. But such a man no longer lived, and so Amon turned not to birth, but to resurrection. Channeling the solar energies collected by the Crystal Tower, and coupled with his newly refined vivification techniques, he did the impossible. Zand rose again. But what walked was no mere man. He was restored, and made immortal, and filled with a fire not wholly his own. And with his return, Allag burned bright once more. The forges roared again, the armies swelled, the scientists worked night and day. The empire stood poised once more to spread its dominion, and it turned its eye southward to the land of Mericidia. But Mericidia did not bow. There, dragons still held sway, and the peoples of that land were strong and unyielding. The Mericidian horde met the Allagans with flame and fang, and for a time the tide was held. Yet the Allagans had become creators of horrors. They fashioned weapons beyond reckoning, abominations that surpassed the strength of dragons. In a battle of unspeakable ruin, they slew Bahamut, mightiest of the first brood, and drove the Mericidians to despair. And so the people of Mericidia did what men once did in the dark. They prayed. From that faith rose terrible beings, not gods, but icons, mighty and wrathful. Chief among them was Sephiroth the fiend, Zervan the demon, and Sophia the goddess. Called together the warring triad. With their coming, the Allagans were driven back, their victories undone. Zand, maddened by war and by death long denied, demanded victory at any cost. The mages of Allag, trembling beneath his gaze, sought a new magic, not to slay the icons, but to bind them. And so they did. The warring triad were imprisoned, sealed in crystal and silence. But the war was not ended. Tiamat, beloved of Bahamut, called upon the old ways. She summoned her mate anew, not in flesh but in memory and wrath. What rose was not Bahamut, but something twisted and vast, a shadow of sorrow and rage. The Allagans were brought again to the brink. In their hunger for victory, they turned even to the void. Through dark communion, Zand made a pact with the cloud of darkness, sovereign of that shadow realm. In exchange for unlimited vessels to house the void sent, allowing them to exist in the corporeal realm, the Emperor demanded their allegiance in war. With each fallen foe, another vessel was made. The undead army swelled, fed by slaughter, bound by unholy magic. Even Bahamut, risen and raging, could not overcome their tide. But now they had learned to control what once defied them. They learned to control and bleed the icons of their strength, and drew energy from their very souls. Even dragons were not spared. Bahamut, weakening as his source of strength, crystals, waned, was also captured by the Allagans. They placed neurolinks upon Bahamut and chained him, a living engine of war. And so at last, Mericidia fell. But victory brought no joy. Zand, who had known death and returned, could no longer find meaning in life. Peace disgusted him, and in the end, madness consumed him whole. He ordered the construction of a sphere, vast, iron-bound, and within it, Bahamut. This orb he launched into the heavens, where it would draw fire from the sun, and open wide the gates to the void. From beyond, the cloud of darkness would come, and with her, the end of all things. But the people would not follow him to ruin. An uprising stirred, an army of the sane against the damned. they stormed the palace, cast out the mad emperor, and sealed him within the crystal tower. Yet even in defeat, Zand had loosed the final doom. The sphere, later called Dalamud, was activated. The power flowed. The void gate stirred, but the world itself rebelled. The land beneath the tower could not bear the weight. It cracked, crumbled, and collapsed, and the crystal tower was swallowed whole. Allag fell. But even in ruin, Amon endured. With a final spell, he halted time within the tower, preserving its secrets and its sleepers for a future age. The tower and its denizens fell into a deep slumber. When the crystal tower fell silent, the world that once basked in its brilliance was cast into confusion and chaos. A civilization built entirely upon its light, its boundless energy and carefully engineered wonders was thrust into disarray. Machines faltered, their breath stilled. Lamps, once aglow with artificial starlight, flickered out. The delicate veins of communication and transport were severed. And above the cloud line, in the distant sectors such as Azazlar, the Allagans were stranded, islands adrift in still skies with no lifeline to sustain them. The flow of provisions ceased. Facilities, once pristine and held in delicate balance, began to crumble. Without the hands and will to hold them back, the chimeras, unnatural beasts shaped by forgotten science, slipped loose from containment. In time, they turned upon their makers. The Allagans, proud and exacting, knew then that control would not return. One by one, they abandoned the floating islands. Azazlar, a marvel of ether and artifice, was left behind. Its spires cradled only by mist and monsters for 5 long millennia, forgotten until the dawn of the 7th astral era. The calamity that silenced the crystal tower claimed most of the empire. Its grandeur collapsed, and with it the royal line faded into dust. Yet one flame remained. Princess Selena, young, keen of mind, and born of Zand the First's blood. She saw what others could not. Though the circus tower had fallen, it had not been destroyed. It slumbered, entombed beneath the earth, preserving not only ancient knowledge, but ancient terrors. And within her, Selena bore a power, dark and dangerous, gifted through her ancestors' unholy pact. A pact forged in the shadow of ambition, sealed with the bloodline of Zand himself. As long as that blood endured, there remained a force in the world strong enough to bind the cloud of darkness. Selena, unable to destroy the tower, did what she could. She entrusted her legacy. Using remnants of Allagan biotechnologies, she transferred both her lineage and the ancient power it carried to a faithful companion, one who would guard it through time. That power became known as the Allagan Eye, and even now it glimmers faintly in the gaze of those descended from Selena's line. Among them are the Makote of the Seeker of the Sun's G tribe, where her story lingers, not in stone or monument, but in memory, passed from one age to the next like an almost forgotten folk tale.